Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Upside Musings podcast. My name is Oke Ndibe. It's my delight to welcome you on behalf of my co-host Emeka Onyagwa. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at some developments in Nigeria, particularly the short-lived strike, general strike that basically shut down every economic activity and much of social life in Nigeria for a day and a half before the strike was suspended for, I think, 5 days. We're also going to be looking at the brouhaha over the national anthem in the country, as well as the way in which the civil service in Nigeria has been substantially degraded, and in particular, a recent development where the Minister for the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, brought newly promoted permanent secretaries to go and, as it were, adore the president of the country, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So it's my delight to welcome you. And Emeka, how has it been on your side?
It's been interesting. I always find time to slip out and catch comic relief from whatever I'm reading at the moment.
Yes.
So whatever I'm doing actually, whatever in this case, this morning I had a book to finish. But you always have yesterday and today, so one always has time to catch comic relief. Nigeria is a cruise, top to bottom.
Yes.
And it's very interesting. But what do you think of the strike, Don?
Well, let me see. Because my thoughts are all over the place. You and I know that what passes as the trade union leadership in Nigeria has been captured for decades now by political leadership, and it actually started during the military regimes when military leaders basically figured out that instead of dealing with the entire body of workers in Nigeria, they could simply sponsor people to become trade union leaders, people to become student union leaders, and that way remotely control the activities of both the student student unions as well as trade unions. And so for many years now, I think that workers have had very little confidence in the leadership of their unions. So that the unions, even when they backed, nobody took them seriously. Nobody expected them to bite. But I think that the strike that happened on Monday, which was effective all over the country, is perhaps the first strike. I mean, I remember the threats of strikes when President Jonathan removed, or at least reduced, not even entirely removed, but reduced oil subsidies, and with a little increment in the price of fuel. But this was perhaps the first strike in many, many years in Nigeria that had widespread success in its implementation, as well as in the popular support. Again, in the past, our country's political leadership has always resorted to divide and conquer. So they would, if the trade union leadership was Yoruba and the person who happened to be the leader of the country was from the north, say Fulani leader, the strike would be, the government would give the impression that this is an attempt by the Yoruba or the South to undermine the leadership of the country, the political leadership. But I think that finally that to his credit, Tinubu has so ramped up social misery in Nigeria and socialized it, generalized it, so that there's really nobody in Nigeria who can say, well, there are people who are profiting. Whenever there is suffering, there are actually profiteers from suffering. But that's a less and less substantial number of people who are profiting from the general misery in Nigeria. When I talk to people in Nigeria, people who are top civil servants, people who are businessmen, even some millionaires, people who have substantial means, are beginning to reckon with the fact that the country, the way it's going, cannot be sustained. So I think that it is to Tinubu's discredit, I will say, that in such a short time, in fact, a day after the man took office, the country was already wretched. In a lot of ways, as soon as he was announced as the elected president, because of the kind of campaign he ran, because of the way, egregious way that the election was rigged, I think that there was a sense of doom within the country, that the Japa phenomenon, which had been creeping up during Buhari, had an explosion where a lot of young men and women who had options opted to exercise those options by leaving to other shores, to countries abroad to pursue their dreams. But the fact that Tinubu removed the price, the subsidies on fuel, and then led to more than a threefold sudden and unexpected threefold increase in the price of fuel, meant that every sector of the economy in Nigeria was adversely affected. So I think that this was a welcome development of sorts, because you can't sustain life where, as we have said again and again on this show, where a man's entire salary for the month, or a woman's entire salary, a worker's monthly salary, has to be put together for 3 to sometimes 5 months to buy one bag of rice. I keep coming back to that portrait, because I think that when you speak about, oh, this is the minimum wage in Nigeria and prices are rising, people don't quite get it. But when you tell them that to buy a bag of rice, if a worker on minimum wage in many states in Nigeria, or even in the nation, wants to buy a bag of rice, this worker would need to save 3 to 4 months at minimum of their monthly salary, not take out a penny in order to purchase a bag of rice. So I don't know. In a sense, my question is, what took the Labour leadership so long? I don't know. What's your take?
Well, I mean, you've documented a lot of it. It is a fact that the total capture of unions in Nigeria happened during the military regime, but more specifically in the 80s with Babangida, especially, because you saw the effectiveness of what specifically it was, and he co-opted it so much so that he wanted the Labour leader, I believe the NLC president then. Again, sometimes something I always, I think I'm going to sometimes when I get in deeper into these conversations, just to be accurate. So typically with Nigeria, is not, there is just less of pure accuracy, but substance to some degree, primarily because we don't have these kind of Nigerians are typically devoid of substantive conversations to that degree. Not that we're not intelligent people, it's just so sometimes you get the details lost in certain things, but the substance of it is not what's ever lost. But anyway, so much so that it got to the point where in 92, when they had the elections, 93, this thing is that Babangida wanted Pascal Bayafiu, I think that's his, I always do this thing as well, Pascal Bayafiu to be the vice president of this thing, of what they call him, of
unions?
Of MKO. So he used to be the union, this thing in the north, then from the north, then NLC president, I believe. Is to say that I need to get back to his actual name. So it is not that people make that connection generally, but when you do look at it, it's a fact that he wanted Pascal Bayafiu. Pascal Bayafiu, I believe, used to be NLC president at that point in time. Well, not at that point in time, but had been. But it said a lot that if you had even come into early 90s, Babangida had banned literally anybody that he felt was some kind of threat to him from running as president. That's why they had wanted him. They had wanted Pascal Bayafiu. Babangida wanted Pascal Bayafiu. The SDP people had wanted Atiku, because Atiku had retired, I think, 4 or 5 years prior, and he was a big arm in the what they call the SDM movement. I believe that's what it was called then.
Yeah.
So
with
the point of all
with Yaradua.
With Yaradua Senior, both of them are late now.
Yaradua,
the older Yaradua. The point of all this is to say that since the 90s, since the days of Shorway, which it was slowly dying off, which somebody like Shorway uses as his badge of honor. For those that don't know Shorway, he's a political figure. He calls himself a publisher, Sahara Reporters. At a point in time, I felt he did good work at a point in time, and I personally feel he has taken the wrong road. But his publication, not him, has taken the wrong road. He's taken the political route personally, which remains to be seen. It seems like he wants to definitely be president, as occasioned by the fact that he keeps running and he maintains the presidency in Nigeria, even before his detention and after his detention for a restriction to Nigeria for 5 years. Anyway, so you have a situation where the unions are just completely, by the time you get into the 90s, late 90s, where some of us get into the universities, or at least our mates, and some of us get into the Nigerian universities. Let's say our mates get into Nigeria, because I didn't totally school in Nigeria for this thing. When some of our mates get into the Nigerian universities at that point in time, there was literally no activism anymore. It was largely cults. It was, when I say cults, I really do mean it in the most negative sense of the word, right? They were largely cults and all these things, and killer gangs that masqueraded as public interest to some degree, right? So, but in this case, it turned out that in 2012, unions were mobilized now to protest against the fuel price removal. And we have to remember, at this point in time, again, we have all people. We can have all these conversations on different people in different places. At this point in time, Jonathan was president, and Okonjo-Iweala was the coordinating minister for. She had been brought back. She was a major wheel in a major piece in Obasanjo's, what I would say, and what the economic indices shows, was maybe the most successful period in Nigerian history. Maybe, the only point you can say, maybe, when I say successful, in terms of economic indices, people getting lifted out of poverty, the middle class. I could give you an anecdotal story in my case where I remember, again, this is not to endorse Obasanjo or say he was a great president, because I felt, based on expectations, which I always complained about, but I can phrase it this way: based on expectations of the majority of people, based on even he did capture a lot of low-hanging fruit, GSM and other things. Based on the low-hanging fruits he should have done, things like structure the country, which he knew he had, he pretty much decided that his restructuring was third term. Things like handling the power situation by rebuilding the power structure, which he refused to do, and instead went into refurbishing the power and the oil sectors in Nigeria with the oil refinery. Obasanjo failed in most people's expectations, right? But economically, if you look at the indices, a lot more people were lifted out of poverty. I was going to give the anecdotal story on how my parents were going to rent their house out in Calabar. And in 18 months of Obasanjo, it turned from, the longest story, 45,000 to 750,000, which was the actual value of the place at that point in time to rent out back then per year. But anyway, that's this thing. So you have a situation where by 2012, you had Okonjo-Iweala coming in, who had been part of this economic wheel that did a lot of good reforms, GSM, all that. Obasanjo, Okonjo-Iweala was part of that, this thing. Atiku, that was head of the National Economic Council, was also there, was also criminally buying up a lot of this thing. So it's not to give all these people, it's just to say the facts as they are, right? That's the kind of person I take the facts as they are. Atiku was at the head of this economic development in Nigeria that lifted more people out of poverty than probably in the history of Nigeria. Say maybe the LS times would be pre-independence, really, if you're being honest. But anyway, and you had Okonjo-Iweala who had now come back. You had Soludo also, who I think was a fantastic CBN governor, and I think he's a horrible governor, a horrible state governor. And we saw the indices of it the moment he opened his mouth a year ago and started talking about Peter Obi. But anyway, I think now there's no argument towards it that he's this thing. But that's separate. But as CBN governor, though, Charles Chukwuma Soludo was a very good CBN governor. Overall, people could have the argument here and there. That's fine. But you had to conjure. I want to say a lot of the people that were in the Obasanjo team had made their way there. And a key clock to it is that back in 2012, they had categorically, in fact, the reports had said, Okonjo-Iweala said that if they went back on forced subsidy removal, she was going to resign. Categorically said that. It's in Jonathan's book, which after last, I had to go and download the book and read exactly what he puts in his book. It was very intuitive what he puts in his book and very interesting outrightly. He fingered the US government for wanting him out because he didn't play ball. Some people talked about, some other people that wrote their own books talked about gay marriage, the opposition to gay marriage. But a lot of other people make the distinction that gay marriage is not, it might be a big deal. It might have been a big deal for Obama, but the biggest deal is always to the military industrial states, which ties into stuff like Israel and other things, right? And there was Jonathan wasn't totally on board, according to another school of thought. Anyway, Jonathan alludes to what they call him, to directly names, not even alludes, he directly names John Kerry and co. And if people remember, Obama made an advert for Nigerian elections where he said something like, vote your future or something like that. If people can go back and look for it, people don't remember that. And you can read into what Obama meant and what his administration meant. But more importantly, in Jonathan's book, he talked about the hidden forces sponsoring the protests against himself. And this is the key point of why I'm bringing back, why we're going to 2012. He talks about the key point in his book. This is chapter 3 of that book. Between 3 and 2, he talks about it. The key, he doesn't name everybody, he kind of like talks about Buhari to some degree. And my sense from reading the book, one, is as a president, it looks weak to name people who technically should be beneath you. A good example is Obama. I'll give you an example. Obama tried to, according to him, let's put it this way, right? He tried to dislike Netanyahu, I think rightfully so. He tried to put the Middle East peace process back to the 1967 Accords and all that. And he talks about, he has the scars to show for it. even he doesn't name all the people in existence. Some people are now beginning to see some of those people that work for him and what their mindsets are. For those that just look at it and see neutral of just media bombardment from left, right, and center. But so somebody in that position of Jonathan doesn't allude to people like that were sponsoring certain things to pull up this. But he alludes to it, but he doesn't directly name. Now, you can fill in the blanks. These people, I don't think you need to be a genius to fill in the blanks. You can go read the book if you want. It's there. I actually think it's in certain countries you can get the Kindle download. It wasn't necessarily available in America for the free Kindle download. But it was something about this thing. I got it download. I read the book. You can go read the book. It's like a very concise this thing and all that. But all this to say that the 2012 protests were led by outside forces who capitalized on anger in the land over a much smaller amount of suffering comparatively than you have today. So now you have the 2024 protest, which is the first protest of any significance since the 2012. And prior to that, even when you go back. So it was effective. It shut down the power grid. It shut down the airports. You have, to begin to describe the amount of hunger in Nigeria is amazing. I'm not even saying people that don't have jobs, people that work, right? You've described it, and you have to save months of your salary to buy a bag of rice and all that, right? And we could go on and on. Let's talk to people that work and all that, but they have to borrow money to buy Gary, and I was speaking to a friend yesterday, buy Gary and this thing to feed his child, or his children, right? He had even eaten for 3 days. At least according to him, but I have no reason to doubt him. He's eating more of biscuits and water for 3 days. And I have no reason to doubt him because some of these people, I've known them. I've known some of these people since we were in kindergarten, pretty much. But anyway, and in this case, I've known him since we were in kindergarten. We've been in this thing, this person I'm talking about, we were even in the same parish at a point in time, same parish church. So you get to this and it was effective. And overnight, after a day of effectiveness, they called it off and they postponed it for 5 days, according to them. And there's still a lot of anger in the land. And a big part of the effectiveness is that the hunger clearly doesn't know any tribe or
party
ethnic group or party affiliation or whatever it is. If your political party that you supported, which I don't, I think, I always say one of my biggest eye openers was 93. That's when I realized I'm Igbo. And there's a difference because we had to pack our things over the elections and go to Nigeria. It made me open my eyes a lot. Go to Nigeria. We just came back. We had to go to the east. Thank you. Yeah. We had to pack our things, pack this massive generator, then everything. And my father was a 2-star general, and we did all that. It made me realize that there's a difference. And when the differences come, it comes in those ways. And it was very interesting to see. And when we got to the east, we saw all of my cousins from Lagos there and all that. Anyway, but fast forward to now, it was very interesting to see how people were very. You didn't have a choice because most people can't even go to work. Most people can't even feed.
Yeah,
so
it's. I've talked often about this friend of mine who runs a government department, and he told me that he's basically allowed the staff to come in once a week, once in a week and a half, once in 2 weeks to the office, because he said that if he insisted that everybody come to work every day, that there are some of his staff on minimum wage whose salaries will run out because some of them live in their hometowns. They're on 30,000 naira, and they cost something like 3,000. to come to work from their hometown. So he says he just couldn't do this to them, because these are also workers who have other responsibilities. They have children who go to school. They have to feed their families and so on and so forth. So I said to them, just come when you can. But I mean, you made a very important point. So in retrospect, clearly, in this 1999 iteration of our democratic experiment, the democratic experiment that began in 1991 with the election of Olusegun Obasanjo. Looking back, we can say that Obasanjo clearly was a golden age, okay? That Nigeria, Obasanjo had very astute people working for him in many, many sectors. We've spoken about Okonjo-Iweala. Okonjo-Iweala was key to having Nigeria's external debt forgiven, or negotiated down to almost virtually zero. And it's important, of course, to note that much of that external debt was accumulated fraudulently. That in a sense, what Nigeria has done in the past, the leadership in the country is to take loans from international agencies or sometimes bilateral loans from other countries, not invest the loans in the projects for which they were secured, but in a sense to bunker the loans and then plunder the loans and take them back to the countries where we secured the loans. And meanwhile, it will be put in the books that Nigeria is owing so much, the country has not benefited. And so part of the exasperation that some of us have felt is that Obasanjo did not make that critical step of holding people accountable who had committed some of those crimes. He did potentially wonderful things by establishing the independent ICPC and then the EFCC to monitor corruption. But again, he had a heavy hand in determining who was to be pursued by the
subsequently, he established it and then subsequently undermined them.
Precisely, undermined them, yeah. So when they went after his people who were close to him, he basically instructed them to drop the cases and so on. And then he used them to target his political, so sort of what you might call selective prosecution, selective targeting. And also, I think that one of the bad things that Obasanjo did is how he set the trend for rigging elections. So basically, in his time, when there was any election, the PDP took the position unless it was not interested in a particular state or seat, unless the stakes for the urge for violence, like places like Kanu, he will leave Kanu alone because he knew that, if he meddled in Kanu, there could be just the kind of violence that would undermine possibly his own administration and perhaps lead to a coup d'etat. But otherwise, when he declared the Yaradua election, which he led, he campaigned, he spoke for Yaradua, Yaradua was nearly absent. And he said that this was a do or die affair. And that's the way that ultimately that election was carried out. Or in the election of Andy Oba as governor of Anambra State, where the entire field of serious candidates was disqualified by INEC, because that's what would clear the coast for Andy. And on election day, basically they wrote the results in polling booth after polling booth and tabulated the things and ultimately ended up awarding Andy more votes than there were registered voters in Anambra State. So, and the way in which he empowered miscreants and just terrible elements like Lamido Adedibu in Ibadan. So much so that the man was able to mobilize police people and thugs to go and attack the governor, Ladoja, who had to escape from his office almost through the window, or the way in which he empowered Chris Oba, so-called godfather of Anambra politics, to again use more than 100 police officers from the zonal command in Umuahia to come into Anambra State, into Oka, and to abduct Chris Ngige, who was then the governor. And on one occasion again, thugs in as many as 50 vehicles swept through Anambra State for 3 days, setting fire to every government establishment, so that Obasanjo wanted to declare a state of emergency again in order to remove Ngige. So Obasanjo's acts, malfeasance, were just too many. I mean, for somebody who subsequently would describe himself as the father of modern Nigeria. So if he set us up as a modern nation, and of course, you spoke about his failure to address the issue of power sector. Nigeria, part of the crisis in Nigeria, I was just talking 2 days ago. I was in Boston and met with a man who used to run a company in Lagos, a medium-sized company. And he was telling me how difficult it is how difficult it was for his company to remain profitable. He said his company would have done excellently, but the fact that they had 3 huge generators and he had to run generators round the clock because they had equipment in his office that were so sensitive, so they couldn't depend on this faltering electric power, and just the rising cost of diesel was so prohibitive that in the end, he said they cut their workforce by half, and then they cut it again by half, and then even the half that was left, that after a while, it used to be, I knew the company in their early days. They had actually invited me on one occasion when I was in Lagos to give a workshop on writing to their management staff, and they paid me handsomely for it. But he said after a while they could no longer pay salaries, so they will pay salaries every 2 months. They will pay 1 month, or even pay a fraction. And then he himself said he simply could not, because he said he didn't want to pay himself when he couldn't pay his staff. So he, took a leave from the company and handed over to the man who was his second in command, and so on. And so this man was telling me, because we were discussing 2 days ago this whole crisis of the strike. In fact, he's on his way to Greece on vacation with his wife, and 2 of their children were supposed to leave yesterday from Lagos to meet them in Greece. And he was saying that he and his wife were concerned that if the strike continued, then their children, who are actually teenagers, would not be able to travel. But the picture, and so this guy is now trying to transition. He happens to be an American citizen as well, so he's trying to transition to life in America. He went to school in America, did his MBA in America, has worked in Nigeria for close to 3 decades. Now he's trying to come back, with all, already you've lost so much in terms of seniority. If he had started with his MBA in this country, he would be a senior vice president in some company. But, what openings are there for somebody who graduated 30-something years ago with an MBA in the US. So it's a way of saying that under Tinubu, things have become suddenly terrible. But it was building up. You did say that, in a lot of ways, we are unjust to Jonathan. But we can say we were unjust to Jonathan only in retrospect, looking back, because when Jonathan was removing some oil subsidy and people began to protest, I think the part of the protest, I think Nigerians are reasonable people. The Nigerians always bend over backwards, right? But what governments in Nigeria always say when they want to remove oil subsidies is, we want to free up money to invest in infrastructure. But what happens is that, when they're paying oil subsidies, there's a lot of scam. There's a lot of multiple, what do they call it? Multiple tripping. So people bring in a shipload of petroleum, and then it's recorded that they brought in so many liters of petroleum. They take the ship back into the sea. A few days later, they'll bring it back. It will be credited to them. They'll be paid subsidies. And the governments knew this. But it is their friends who are bringing in this oil. Sometimes it is their stooges who are doing this. So it's a way that they take out money. Then they find that they cannot sustain the system because the country is becoming bankrupt. Then they say, we have to stop to free up resources to invest, right? But the resources that they free up, they then steal. So that people never feel there's any real investment in infrastructure, real investment in education, real investment in healthcare. So Nigerians then say, okay, we're an oil-producing country. If everything fails, let's at least afford the price of fuel. I think that if you removed subsidies and Nigerians saw that their roads became better, that their hospitals were better equipped, that their schools were better equipped, their teachers were better and well paid, right? That people would actually be accommodating of a higher price that they pay at the petrol pumps and so on. So anyway, so Tinubu brings things to a head. We haven't seen any positives from his administration, but we have seen a lot of profound levels of suffering. And so the question then becomes, where do we go from here? Where do we go after 5 days? So the strike is suspended for 5 days. Is it going to be resumed? Are there going to be any concessions made to Nigerians? Substantial enough concessions that people will say, okay, we're willing to smile and suffer on. And that's I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes to. But one thing I wanted to add to the Pastor Bayafor thing, it's because it's very interesting. So in it lists one of the people that chronicled this thing pretty well in his book was Julius Bonnevere. So he chronicled it in a lot of articles. Short, you could pick it up in JSTOR, all that struggle for democracy. Phenomenal stuff. A lot of other people have used it in their works, but essentially this is what really happens. I mean, so you can go and pick up even Tell and Newswatch, and if you, that's even something I need to actually get some old clippings of the Sun newspaper from 2005 to, anyway, but that's a separate thing. It talks about it here where Bayafor, in essence, he took over from technically Chiroma, but what really happens is that they had split the units and it became they had split the union, like Nigerian Labour Congress became a two distinct struggle. I think they didn't want Bayafor. You have to go deeper into it, but in essence, Babangida is the one that tipped the scale for Bayafor to be NLC president. He was sitting as NLC president when, some people write here, well, he was the one trying to convince Abiola to make him VP, but the reality was Babangida himself was trying to convince Abiola to make him VP. because Babangida at this point in time was late in the day. They had cancelled his elections so many times. You yourself had coined him the Maradona. You know, he had dribbled everybody and dribbled himself.
Yes.
In a sense, right? And so he had no options, no good choices. To cancel it again was going to be hard. So kind of like I think Abiola played into that as well. You would also have to explore the Abiola CIA connection, which is very vivid in terms of arms shipments and other things and what's happening. I mean, these are documented. If you go back to the coups and all that, the CIA, the MI6 were all in the building when they were deciding what should go on right from 1966 onwards. It's well documented. It's well documented in State Department. These things you can also go there and take a look at it, where they talk about the goal of the federal government, quotes the State Department, is to eradicate the Igbos. The goal of the Nigerian federal government is to eradicate the Igbos, which is what the U.S. state government is writing in their distance at that point in time. Something you can always go back to. But it's just to say that it was a lot worse than that. Biafra passes in 2012, obviously, but you had a situation where Labour was actively in politics. Biafra was NLC president. He was also contesting for this guy at the same time. Why I'm saying that is that I wasn't sure if he had stepped down, but he didn't step down till after this thing in 1994. So it did a lot worse. So he didn't step down till after Abacha took over. Abacha, I believe, probably had a hand in getting him, because Abacha didn't just tolerate any kind of possible dissent, possible anything. Abacha was very brutal. In fact, he was listed as the ringleader of the people that refused to allow Babangida stay on. And Babangida owed Abacha he owed him his life multiple times over for a better. The last coup that they didn't kill Abacha in Ibadan, but Abacha was the one that mobilized, and the moment they heard Abacha wasn't dead, the whole coup just fell apart. But they had got him in the brothel that he was in. They had come in. They had bombed. Well, not bombed. They had used these tanks to shoot the house down and all that. And whether it was out of fear or whatever, they just assumed the guy was dead and they left. And Abacha came out and everybody. So anyway, Abacha was another very brutal individual by his records, right from when he was the second lieutenant during the what people call the counter coup, or you can call it the mutiny, whichever one, on the way to when he was president, where he put even Obasanjo in prison. And Obasanjo most likely would not have survived.
Obasanjo and Yaradua, yeah. No, I mean the conventional wisdom is that he had Yaradua killed, and he was planning to kill Obasanjo before he himself perhaps took that poisoned orange or something.
Yeah, well, all we know for a fact is he was with his good friend up until 3 a.m. in the morning.
That's right.
And his good friend is called Jerry Boy. If you call a grown man at 60-something years old Jerry Boy, I leave you for the imagination why it's called Jerry Boy. Well, suffice to say, this guy had like 200 or something guest houses in Nigeria. Not because he had a large family, but he had plenty of activities.
Yes.
in this place. Yes. So he was there's all kinds of things that he ate an apple or whatever. We do know that the Abacha family blamed him, and they didn't call him till there was a conference that day that Abacha died, and they made sure everybody came for the conference, and they kind of locked the door and all that. But they didn't call Husseini till much later, till I think it was like at the end of the day, he got to. He was even lucky, kind of. Anyway, but one thing this thing goes for me, I don't know, because I don't know. It's a keg of gunpowder. It doesn't take much to this thing. I don't think I think the labor leaders, if not all of them, but I'm pretty sure most of them have been settled, as we call it in Nigeria, compromised financially. There's a way to describe it. In 5 days, people are going to be watching. I do not think it's in their hands. I don't think it's in the labor leaders' hands. I think things are just that bad. So even be telling stories. I say I have friends who I've known since some of us kindergarten, and I tell people, man, I get multiple people situation reports in their personal life every day. When I say situation reports, I mean save me. It's kind of SOS. So, it's crazy to just and it's really bad for people. You have grown people who drink Gary and the Gary is not even, the guy was telling me what Gary is like 300 naira to buy the Gary and eat for a day. Gary and granite, 500 naira, so 700 naira to buy Gary and granite. And that is a standard meal. That when you even eat that, that's what he fed his son yesterday, and his son was so happy. And for those who don't know what Gary is, right? You can Google Gary, Garri. But Gary is essentially cassava. It's a plant that they take and they dry it, and then when they dry it, they fry it, and then it's very good for making swallow. If you've seen what people call in America, the fufu.
Videos on TikTok about
you see the fufu.
Yes.
So the fufu can be, before you put hot water, you can use cold water and then pour. It's like some people like it, but more as a snack. It's not what anybody.
In my secondary school days, it was a treat. You put some. If you were lucky, you got some groundnut and you got some pig milk and you pour it in and you put some sugar.
Ooh. And you
some people would even sprinkle salt. Yes, that's what
it was a great fit for people in my secondary school as well when I went. So it's been a staple in Nigeria maybe for the last 100 years. It is even when you put the milk and the sugar, it really is at best a snack. It is not what people sit down,
people eat,
and should be eaten as a meal for days on end. When you are doing that, it's bad. Typically, if you something that you really like, you like eating with beans. It provides at least some source of protein. You eat it with, something that that balances it out somehow, somewhere. A lot better if that's what you really like. But nobody sits down and eats this thing and granuts every day for days on end. Anyway, so that's why we'll see what happens next coming days. I don't know.
I think it remains to be seen, as you said. I think that the history of governments suborning and compromising and pocketing labor leaders is actually one that a Tinubu will be very, very versed in that art. But I think that the suffering in the country is so deep and profound and pervasive that it may well be out of the hands, as you suggested, of these labor leaders. We're going to see in 5 days. But even if the government offered some increase in minimum wage, even if you double the minimum wage at this point, and I don't see the government doing more than that, right? Already some states, as we speak, have not been paying up to the 30,000, which was agreed on some years ago. Some states are still paying in the region of 20 to 22,000 a month. So if the federal government agrees to a substantial increase, how many states are going to be able to pay that? And of course, we know the history of Nigeria, that anytime there's an increase in wages, there is a more than commensurate increase in the price of goods and services, so that it may well be simply to recycle poverty, to make the poor feel that they have a few more naira to spend, when it would ultimately mean that even the few more naira they have will be inadequate in chasing a lot more, chasing the goods and services that they desire. But because today I know that you have some errands to catch up on, so
so we could smash the next 20 minutes and
So I thought that we could talk, as I said, about the whole shebang about national anthem. So Tinubu some years ago had said that he preferred Nigeria's post-independence national anthem rather than the one that was given to the country, I believe in the mid. When was the current national anthem given? I suspect it was wasn't it the Obasanjo military regime, I think, that put together Nigerian musicologists and so on, who came up with an anthem. And so we're back to, apparently, the first national anthem, which begins Nigeria, we hail thee, and so on, written by, I think, a British housewife, So what do I think of it? I find the two anthems that Nigeria has had in its history particularly uninspiring, the two of them. I think that the first one, because of its provenance, because it was authored by a British woman, that is particularly odd that a country should sing its being, as it were, because that's what an anthem represents. That hymn that embodies your collective dreams, embodies your aspirations, and embodies your being, what it means to be a Nigerian. So it's, for me, curious that Tinubu, is a big fan of the old anthem. If I had to tinker with the national anthems, I would have actually gone for yet another, rather than choose between the two. Look for another one. But in the grand scheme of things, this is not near any priorities for anybody. Nigerians are suffering, and they are suffering massively. And so the whole which anthem do we choose? The whole debate is a distraction. It's just a way of making a suffering people think that there is something out there about their anthem. I would actually say, let's have no anthem. Let's have no national flag. Let's have, if you like, let's abolish the Nigerian state, because the Nigerian state simply enables a few, a tiny elite within the country to pocket the country's resources. So I don't even see the logic, the rationale for an anthem in Nigeria now. We haven't settled the question of what does it mean to be a Nigerian? What values are embedded in the idea of Nigeria? We haven't addressed such issues. So if we're going to have an anthem, we're going to answer those questions and then have an anthem that both embodies and reflects the values that we have all agreed on. So I think it's nothing less than more than a distraction. I don't know what you're
I mean, it sums up being a distraction. It's nothing really. It's nothing really to do about it. There are more pressing problems. Anthem or no anthem, I don't think changes anything. Tinubu had always said that if he had the chance, that's what he would do. He's gone in and he's had the chance, and that's what he's done. He's given anthems. He's giving his boys awards, and naming stuff after his friends and all that. So he's not he's not bothered about. And this is the thing to people who everything is all about what the identity of identitarianism. Nigeria is tribalism, right? It's at the end of the day, you that you're shouting on the road and you're saying like, Lagos or whatever you're calling, or wherever you're calling, or whatever trope you're using, we're born to rule, whatever silly trope you start using. You are shouting for these people. And when somebody says anything about you, it's like, it's like, none of these people care about you. They simply don't care about you. And it's interesting, let's put it that way. That's a longer story, which so maybe at some point in time, I know definitely this story probably definitely went by the grace of God when I write my memoir and in maybe in 10 years time, it will definitely make it there. But in terms of just why we have this, we are to the extreme where we sit down with all these people, they act in the ways they act, and we've become paralyzed. Well, Nigerians have become paralyzed to handling any of these things, but looking at everything needs to be looked at from my identitarian lens. Like, I'll give you an example, right? One of my WhatsApp groups, right? And guy was talking about, they're talking about stuff. And what caught my eye in the group was talking about, they were talking about politics stuff. And just like your friend, very similar. My friend, about the same age, he had been here, got married here, but got married to a Nigerian American. Well, yeah, and it didn't work out. But he always had the plan of going back to Nigeria, and he does that and all that, and he's in Nigeria, and they're all like, all of these guys are always like, your problem is A, B, C, D. Typical is the West End. Everything is always the West End, this thing, or, and anyway, he sits down and he's talking about what they call it, the former deputy senate president or acting deputy who is in jail in the UK.
Okay.
And before he wants to talk about it, he prefaced it by saying, he's from Enugu, so he can talk about it. And, sure and behold, everybody keeps quiet because he's from Enugu and he's the one to talk about it. And I didn't say anything in the group. I'm just like, in my head, I'm just like, man, this rot has finished people. Like, what in the name of God? This is the problem. You need to ascribe to even criticize any of these people. It's like the other day, Aisha Yusufu is not like, I'm not standing up for the anthem. People are, you're like, no, I'm, and people start wanting to criticize people from. It's like, you're either a country or you're not. If you've imported the extreme identitarianism that you have in a lot of these countries to your country, just know that it's not to your benefit. Some of these countries are still together in spite of all these identitarianisms, because they've been bequeathed stronger institutions, which, more and more, we'll see how far it holds. Mm-hmm. But it takes you nowhere. You don't even have strong institutions to be bothered about any of these things. So when people see all these things and they're like this and that, and they go and it's like, you're either a country or you're not. And if you're not, it's fine. There's no big do. Stop being one. But if you are one, you're going to, start fighting the rot. You have this rot in Nigeria where we just sit down and we look at all these people, and once you have a position, it's like nobody can. There's no criticism. There's no, oh no, this guy is. It's like, no, you put things in order. Like I said, I've had in my own personal life, I've had these people who captured positions in some cases, and in other cases who acquired positions, both in this case legal and religious positions, and became torments in everybody's lives. To the point that when the rest of the family is fighting, they point blames to other people. Mm-hmm. I've seen it happen in my life, and it's something that it happens in many people's lives in Nigeria. I don't think I'm even peculiar in that distance. It's just when I write my memoir in 10 years' time, I'll fully state my own distance there. But it's something we sit down and we don't put things in perspective. It's what we were talking about last time. When we're talking about the Shoyinka episode, right? When we're talking during the Shoyinka episode, we don't put things in perspective. We sit down and we're like, no criticism because it's a different ethnic group, or it's a this, is a that, is a this. And when you have that level of mediocrity, in fact, it's not even mediocrity is even getting insulted by Putin. When you have this level of tribalism, which is what it is, whether it happens in the West, when it happens in the West, which it does, which is happening now, you see it with whether it happens in India, which is a staple, you see it with people's tribalisms. It's the ugliest form of humanity, one of the ugliest, maybe the ugliest form of humanity you can have. And all you're going to end up having are people that owe you nothing. Somebody gets in there and he wants to put up an anthem. He owes you nothing. He didn't even bother campaigning. All he told you is that it's a turn of the Yoruba people. Doesn't owe you anything. And the worst part is those people, mobs of people who go about either shaking when people try to, well, that's what you have. And, the last thing we're going to add to that was just the situation where we had this video where Nelson Wike, who is always an entertaining jester, I don't know if I'm allowed to criticize him. Well, he's an entertaining jester.
If you have property in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, then you can't criticize him.
I thank God I don't.
Good. Then go ahead.
But even if I did, I see so many people who do. Aisha Yusufu has so many properties there. She criticizes him all the time. I'm sure he's busy looking for her property document. If you do, anyway, I don't believe in. I believe, I believe all these things come and they go. So don't get too hung up over it, man. That's my own advice to people. Don't get too, even if I see so many people with so many things to lose, criticizing left, right, and center. And you see them. Some of them have plenty of, like I say, Candice Owens, I've come to respect her as a consistent person. But, her husband is actually like a billionaire. But I don't think even if her husband wasn't a billionaire, she wouldn't do it. But I'm just as an example anyway. I'm just saying. So you have all these people. It doesn't matter where you are. If you sit down. Yeah.
So you're talking about Nyesom Wike.
Nyesom Wike comes in.
Cabinet Secretary parade.
The newly appointed permanent secretary. It's a very. I would have even some. I think I should be playing some of these videos sometimes. When it's very, very. You should.
Yeah, we should play the videos.
We should play the video. We should play these videos. It's hard to describe. It's just better to just watch the video and see how people are made to how people get to their positions. Somebody was saying the reason why a lot of these people behave this way, and it's not just in government, in media, in academia, and everywhere. It's no, especially from Nigeria, in Nigeria, it's because of what they've gone through to even get anywhere. They dehumanize you, debase you. They talk. You. I was talking with even my mom the other day, and we're talking about, and somebody, not to get into it's one of these, but even she's like, yeah, well, this person must have helped this person get there. Well, no, sorry, this person must, anyway, I'm not even describe it, but my mother just essentially alluded to like, yeah, that person couldn't have decided for themselves, that somebody must have instructed them. Somebody instructed them to do that. This person should have, but in a way, my mom was right, because it's like, you've been so debased, you don't have free will and agency, you just become, to get anywhere is, look, you can get anywhere is salutations and quietness, and you can't is tribe, is age, is this, is that, and you just have to sit down quietly, and then even when you get there, it is, I kid you not, please, I should have gotten ready with this video. It is one of those things that people should just Google it and watch, just the way they've given you they debase your this thing. They say that's what you've been praying for. Even your pastors have been praying to him and come to him. You need to watch it, and that's emblematic of Nigeria, where there's just your humanity doesn't exist. Your free will, decision, your whole self doesn't exist. You don't exist as a human being. And that's the sad part about these things. It's not gonna, but it's very interesting. Watch the video. It's interesting. It does give a good snapshot of Nigeria, something we should I don't know. I should feel sorry for it to some degree, I guess. But anyway, it is very interesting.
Yeah.
We had to take a look at it, and everything that's happening is just it's very interesting. It's a good comedy to. It's a good comedy. In fact, I was going to say that I don't even know. Looking at Nigeria, I'm not even sure that. I think like everybody plays everybody. I don't even think anybody's what they are. I was thinking about it. I'm like, man, I think everybody plays everybody. I don't think anybody. You don't even know what's on people's minds. In fact, there's one school of thought that Shoyinka supported Tinubu because he knows that Tinubu will be a bad president. So Nigeria can break up or restructure. That's why Shoyinka is like a serious school of thought out there that thinks this way. Yeah,
Really?
Like, yes. I'm like, what? You know what? I'm like, who knows? Who am I to even say? Who knows this guy's Who knows, man? Nobody knows what. We saw how Wike, who they are bound to, how he was displaying and behaving during the elections. For those who did, to even describe it, I think I wait to, all for what? To make sure, and what he had said time and time again that he will, be a constitutionalist and all this nonsense, and he's a lawyer and all that deep nonsense he was talking. And now he's become the biggest impediment in his own state, right? So you never can tell with these people. And it's not just like political speak. It's like most of these people are like Manchurian candidates. You really can't tell what they are even trying. Like, I don't think they themselves know what they're trying to do. I think they just keep stumbling into, who knows, they just go in there and do whatever. And it is a complete, it's dramatic, but the only thing we should be doing is putting people in their proper positions. And when they say things that make no sense, you make no sense. Sorry.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter whatever you are or this thing, like, bro, I'm sorry, you don't make any sense. And this is why you don't make any sense. It's just a fact, man. So
it's a shame because when you see the top civil servants in a country, men who are sworn to serve the nation, not the particular leader in office at any given time, showing open veneration for a leader in a way that really it's so it seems like comedy, but it's a very base, very gratuitous form of comedy, right? And you wonder, what you just said about Wike. Of course, he's embroiled in a war with the man who succeeded him as governor in Rivers State. I'm sure that some people are telling Tinubu that this guy could actually torpedo, that his personal ambitions to control Rivers State could ultimately end up causing so much cataclysm in his state, which will spill over into Nigeria and maybe even doom your presidency. And so that this becomes taking the permanent secretaries on a mission to go and bow and kowtow to Tinubu becomes his way of retaining his political capital with Tinubu. And so the shame is that countries like El Salvador, countries like Senegal, are making leaps and bounds, are transforming themselves, are rising to their best dreams, trying to achieve the vision of themselves. And Nigeria is caught in this silly, base, degrading drama where the best in our civil service, the men and women who should represent the finest that we have in our bureaucracy, are caught in a drama of idiocy.
Yeah.
So
no problem.
So
Well,
anyway,
yeah, that's that.
it's all we have for today, and we thank you very, very much for joining us on this episode, and we await what will happen with the strike in Nigeria, and we'll come back with another analysis. Thank you very much.
All right, later.